what I've got are a few table examples here that I want to show you that I've used this technique on over the past few years. One that I started probably when I started doing this as a class, this candle stand. It's a shaker candle stand. I've never actually made one like this in a class or even sold one. This is actually a walnut candle stand, which the shakers, I don't know if they ever used walnut on something like this. It was always like birch, maple, cherry, pretty much. And here we have a walnut one. But I love walnut in general, but we've got the top is 17.5 diameter. So I needed a circle like that, and I put a nice undercut bevel on it using the same pattern that I created from this circle technique. Here's the actual pattern for that top. See, I know it is because it says it right there. And anyway, this is a piece of MDF that I made the pattern from. And I guess it's a 1/2 inch. It looks like about a 1/2 inch. Yeah. So you can make your templates or your rounds. If you're going to make a round template with this technique, you can make your templates out of a 1/2 inch. Sometimes I'll demo tonight on a 1/4 inch template, and sometimes I'll just go with what I have. But it tends to be not more than a 1/2 inch, whether it's plywood or MDF, something like that. In this case, it's MDF, and that made a nice template. Now, I attached these boards to the back and ran this cleat in, and that's just so I could attach it into my vise, and clamp it in there and lock it in, and I could route right around. I didn't have to have clamps, moving the clamps on this when I was addressing the top with that undercut bevel. So that's one method. Another one I have is this sweet pie. It's like a sunburst, another walnut table with a curly maple banding. This is the one that I made with Terry Moore on episode 3 of that classic woodworking season. And the base is all solid walnut, but I just love that top. It's a core of MDF, and then we veneered over it with that sunburst walnut 8-piece match. And this is the pattern that we used to make these rounds. Now, I first made the pattern with the router circle jig technique that I'm going to show you. So that's why there's a hole in the middle. That's from the circle jig technique. And then I have some other examples here just to show you the variety you can go. Here's a 36-inch. This is a 36-inch circle. I mean, these circles are dead on. That's what's beautiful about them. There's no ripples. There's no bumps. They're just perfectly round. So it's pretty sweet when you have a method that you can kick these out and know that they're accurate and true. So once you make a pattern like this, if you want to apply it, like say this was for a curly maple tilt-top table that I was making, and here's actually a piece of curly maple glued up, but not yet sawn out. So this was the pattern that I would use for this. So after I'd made my circle pattern, my perfect circle pattern, I would just lay it on there and then go around with a pen and then bandsaw or jigsaw that out, then reattach this, and then use that smooth edge to run a flush cut bearing bit and skim around that rough sawn, bandsawn edge. And then what you end up getting is a really smooth edge that's perfectly dead nuts. It's really smooth. Now you could use this same circle jig technique with the hole directly on the solid wood, but then you'd have to drill a hole in it, and that's fine if you want to put it on the other side. But I didn't want to put any holes in there. So what I want to focus on to start with is just run you through the paces, the technique of making this circle jig, I want to call it the router circle jig to make a template or a pattern. I just like having these template patterns around because then you don't have to jig it up again, and you can just take it and use it as a template circle and then attach it to the piece and flush route around. And you've got your circle exactly what you want. All right, so the way to make this jig, I start with MDF usually because MDF is good and flat, and I can trust it for thickness and to stay pretty flat over time. And it's pretty inexpensive. So what I'm going to do is draw a center line. For this one, I'm going to make, I realized I have a 36, I have the 24, I thought, what the heck, I'll make a 32-inch pattern. I don't think I have one. That might make actually a good diameter for, like, let's say you had one of those sectional sofas, you have that L, and you want a little round table in there. It'd be like a good low coffee table height. Pretty good space, nice size. So I'm going to try this. I'll get this template ready, and that'll be one more project I'll never get to. Anyway, I'm going to make a 32-inch diameter top. So I need a piece of MDF like I've got here 23 inches long. Now what I'm going to do here, just to jump ahead and explain you the technique, I'm going to attach the router out here, like near the end, and I'm just going to do that with double stick tape, like carpet tape. It's super easy and useful in the shop. And that will be set up right on the center axis there. So I'll be plunging through this MDF. But first I'm going to drill a hole, a larger hole than the bit I'm using. And then I'm going to know where this bit will be cutting on the router. And I'm going to measure from that mark or that hole to whatever radius I want for whatever circle. And I'm going to come back here and drill a second hole that will be my axis that my jig will pivot on. Okay? The beauty of this is when you're attached here, you could just move that pin any way you want, and you got all kinds of different holes. Now I know that the jigs you buy, you can adjust as well, but man, it doesn't get much cheaper than this. And it's very accurate. I really like this method. So let's just go ahead and mark the center line. I just took this from some scrap. I think it was going to get thrown out. And this will just help me to get both holes down the middle, and it'll just make it a little nicer job. Okay? And I'm going to mark right about where I want the Forstner bit hole. It's going to be right about here. Okay? So I'm going to head over to the drill press. We'll drill through with our Forstner bit, and then we'll come back and mark out our other hole. So let's head over there. So the router bit I'm going to use in the router, I'm using a 1/2-inch router. And I want the hole, the Forstner hole, to be larger than that. So there's just plenty of space for the dust to come out, and I can see more what's going on. So I would go with either a 7/8 or a 1/2-inch bit. I think I've got the 7/8 in there, yeah. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit that center line approximately right on that spot. Okay, there we go. All right, we've got our hole for the router. Now we're going to head back to the bench. Now I want to mark it so that I have a 16-inch radius to give me the 32-inch circle. So rather than hook on here, I'll just go to the 10. That way I'll be sure to get it right, because when I've gone to that 1-inch thing, and invariably you will forget that you added the 1 inch, and you'll make it too short by an inch. So I like to use the 10, then I know. I mean, if I mess up by 10 inches and it doesn't dawn on me, then I've got a bigger problem. So anyway, I marked the 16-inch diameter. I'm at the 26 from the 10. And that will be the point of my axis. Now, I like to use an axis of a 1/4 inch, So I've got this 1/4 inch brad point bit, and I'm going to drill this in the drill press just to ensure that I get a good, true 90-degree hole. So let's head back over there, and then we'll come back to the bench. All right, so I'm going to just get it on that mark and drill away. Okay, now we're going to use this bit more, so I want to bring it with me back to the bench. So here's my Forstner hole. Here's my 16-inch. So I'm 16 from the center. Okay, I'm 16 right from that center line to this edge here. So let me make a little square mark across. So I'm just pulling it right across that edge. So actually what I'm doing here is I'm bringing this in, and when I set the router, I'm going to plunge it down a little bit and rotate this bit so that it's hitting the arc, the apex. And see where I'm putting the cutter? I'm actually putting the edge of the cutter right on that edge. I'm not setting it to the middle of the hole. That was an understandable assumption, but I'm setting it right there. So it's going to just touch there when I double stick it down. That way I know I'm dead on, okay? So I'm going to just put it there, and there we go. So it's just easier to know when you're in the middle of the hole, the larger hole, by using the edge of it rather than trying to center it into this big, large hole. So that's where we're going to go. Now I'm just doing this so that I can get it right in the right area while I have the double stick tape on before it hits, you know, because I don't want to come over here and have it start grabbing. I'll move it right there, and I'll just use those lines to index it. All right, so I'm going to bring up the plate like this, and I just need 3 little squares of double stick tape. Now this I usually get, it's carpet tape. It looks like a fine mesh. If I can get it off. But once I started using carpet tape, oh gosh, it must have been 20 years ago. I never had used it before, but it's got a lot of applications, and it's amazing how useful it is in the shop, like just for doing things like this. But one thing you got to remember is take it off soon after you're done, because this stuff, if it stays on a while, it gets kind of gummy and takes more time to get off. But even if that happens, you can just use that, what's that stuff called? Goo Gone, yeah. Goo Gone is great for getting this stuff off quickly. So it's amazing how strong this stuff is, though. I may be overusing it just with these 3 pieces, but you don't want it to slip, you know, in this case. And this is great because it doesn't, you can't really clamp it. I guess if you had like screw access through the plate, you could do that. And then I just take a little fine knife and get that secondary paper off, and now I'm ready to attach. Now before I attach it, I got to make sure I got all the dust, because that MDF dust will hinder it from really sticking down. All right, so I'm going to get it right where my pencil lines are. I'll check my bit just to be sure. That looks good right there. Now when I have it in position, then I can really press it down. Now to get that to really grab, I like to use just a quick grip clamp of some kind, you know, where you bring it in. Just giving that tape the pressure, it squeezes like air out, and it really bonds it. You got to give it a little bit of pressure, almost more than just pushing down, to ensure that it's really locked in. Okay, that's going to be good. All right, so that's it. We've got our circle jig for our 32-inch radius top. Now, we've got our 1/4 inch hole. I'm going to use this 1/4 inch MDF because it's the best thing I have right now. I could use a larger, thicker piece, like the 1/2 inch, but this is more or less for demonstration. And this will work fine because I have a straight cut bearing that will work against the thickness of this edge. So I cut this square 33 square, and I marked it should be 16.5, yeah, approximately the center point. So what I want to do here is drill through, and I'm going to get it approximately in the middle of this board here. So I'm going to put this just in a hand drill. I'm going to drill as straight as I can. So I'll set it right here. Now what I'm going to do is drill through the MDF and then into this sacrificial 3/4 inch MDF, which is underneath. I'll go about a 1/2 inch or so in there, or until I feel the oak top of my bench. Oh, just kidding. If I feel the oak top of my bench, I will know I've gone far enough. But anyway, this is going to be my sacrificial material, so this axis will actually go into this and keep the whole thing from slipping around when I'm cutting the circle. Okay, so I'm going right in the middle. I'm going to hold it. I can see I'm pretty true this way. I'll check it over here. You know, I don't usually do this, but what the heck? Let's put a little square. And I'll come this way. You could kind of eyeball it that way. Or you could have someone stand over if you're not sure, and then get started. I also sometimes just look at the circle, and I want to see it all hitting at the same time. And that's pretty good right there. Okay, so now I've got the hole in my stock. Now I'm going to bring my jig back over, and I'm going to take now whatever bit you used to drill your holes, I'm going to use the shank as my pivot. It's perfect. It's the perfect dimension to fit through there without any play, but just enough. And then it comes through, and I want to set it right in to the hole that we just made. And it's locked in. Okay, so that's not moving, but there's my pivot. Look at that. Sweet. Okay, so everything's ready. I'm using my bit. There is absolutely no play in this because it's 3/4 inch thick. It's true and square. It gives you such a really nice positive feeling to go around, and it's going to be perfectly smooth edge. Okay. If this is thicker material, I'm going to do this actually as if it was thicker. And actually, I don't like to plunge through this MDF like a full thickness because you're making a lot of this MDF dust, and it's pretty fine and a little bit. It can be nasty if you make too much of it. So what I want to do is just plunge enough so I just touch into it. Okay, I'm just feeling some pressure there, and I'm going to lock it in. So now it's dragging a little line. So I'm going to go around. This is going to score a little line. That's going to show me exactly where that bit is cutting. And then I'll pop it off temporarily. We'll go to the bandsaw and saw just outside that line, bring it back here, and skin just off that little bit rather than routing a 1/2 inch trough all the way around through this 1/4 inch. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so that first line was a little light, so I just plunged slightly. I'm barely a 1/16 of an inch. I don't even think it is. So I'm going to take this out, set it over for a second, over here. Now I've got my circle. So that's my line basically. And we'll head over to the bandsaw and we'll trim that. So now I'm going to just route to that full thickness. And I want to go down into I want to make sure I get the full thickness. And I'm going to be a little bit over my sacrificial table. So I want to only make sure that I go that thickness. So one method I have to get that exact thickness is to plunge. I'm going to plunge and lock it in. So I plunge till I just touch this material. So I'm at 0 depth right now. I'm making no cut. Now I'm going to set the depth stop, whatever your router has for a depth stop, you bring it down and bring it all the way down and lock it in. So I'm pressed in on one of those stops right there. Okay? So now if I plunge down, I'm going to hit the top and the depth stop at exactly the same time. So I'm at 0. So whatever I raise this depth stop is the depth that I'll be cutting. So what I want to do is just with it go back to 0. I'm hitting the table. Now I'm going to release the depth stop and raise it up. And now I'm taking a cutoff from this 1/4 inch material, MDF, and I'm going to stick it right in there as a spacer. So I'm just going to hold it right there and lock it in again. Now I could take that out. And now that space is my 1/4 inch. So I'm going to plunge that distance, which is the same as the thickness as my material. Okay, that's a nice technique to use when you get in those kind of situations. All right, so I want to find the axis point again. I can raise this up. I'll bring out the pin and go into my panel. That is pivoting in exactly the same place. So I've just returned to the exact same point we skimmed that initial circle. So I'm going to put my gear back on, and I'll plunge. I'm probably going to just touch into my sacrificial material, and then I can circle around, or I can turn my material, which I think I'll do because that's kind of fun. I was just finishing up routing the circle, and I think I left off with saying you may wonder why not just use a skinnier bit and plunge all the way through and hit the circle in one shot, never go over to the table there and to the bandsaw and bandsaw it off. Well, you can use, I have used 1/8" bits in the past, but the problem with those is they tend to be a 1/4" shank, and with an 1/8" bit, there's two things going on. The bit speed on the perimeter is significantly slower than a 1/2" bit, and it also is smaller, so you tend to get the little more opportunity for rippling when you're going around, so you get little ripple of chatter. Here with this 1/2" shank bit, 1/2" into the collet of the router and the diameter of the bit, I've got good speed, and also I'm making a nice smooth cut around the whole way. So that's my recommendation, is to stick with a larger one there. So I'm going to just take this off, stand it up, and there we have it. We've got our 32" round diameter template. Now, this could be attached to a top. We could just use it to draw a round. You could bandsaw and then attach it to another top. Now, I don't have a top ready to go with this, but I do have something. I can show you the same technique using this 24" diameter pattern. And imagine if we were going to make a veneered top out of this MDF. So I need it to be my 24" diameter. So I just take it here, and I'll use my perfect template to sketch around. A lot of times these pens, they don't like to draw on the MDF because of the fine dust on it. This one's working out. So there we go. All right. So we're using our template, and we're going to flush route to the template. Now, as I said earlier, you could use the router method. Like, we could have gone directly from our router template, just drill a hole in our actual finished tabletop underside, plug it in. Now imagine if we've got the 12" diameter here, and then we would route, we'd skin it, and then bandsaw it off, and then plunge again and skim the whole edge, and you'd have the whole thing done right directly from your router. So that's the direct approach to your tabletop. The only problem is you're going to leave a pivot hole there that you'll have to plug. Okay. This method, we've got this around, we mark it out, and now we're going to just flush route to it. I'll show you my technique for that. Okay, so we've got our template. Now, I found a number of ways to attach this. There was a time where I started off and I actually had this pre-drilled and I'd run some small screws in to hold my template on quickly. I'd just go whoop, 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 and head over to the router. And you can either use a handheld router with a flush cut bearing. The only thing about that is you have to keep moving your clamps unless you have some way to hold it up in the air like this. But I prefer to set up the flush cut router bit in the router table, which I'm going to show you in a second. Okay, but attaching this, you can run screws. You can use the same double stick tape method, which I've also used, but that's a little time consuming. So if you're making a number of these tops, you want to figure out a way to make it quickly. Now, one method I use that was very fast is when I'm making these smaller round tops like this, I just take the top and it'll be slightly oversized, and then I press down and I can feel it grab. And now I can move this and it's stuck, because what I did was I just tacked in a brad, like an 18 gauge brad. I tacked one in there, one in here, and one here. I tacked it in from this side, and then I snipped it off close. So it's a spur. It's like a little spike, but it's not even a 1/16 of an inch up, and it comes to a point because I snipped it right down close. That's the little spike. So I got 3 of those, and what happens is when you turn it over, and that, believe it or not, that's enough. You just press down there, and those bite, and then you can take it to the router table and just use it like that, and then you're fine. You're free and clear. Now, if you're going to put something on here, like sometimes I'll just take a little bit of wood dough, very quick, and hit all of the pieces, and it's a very quick sand, and you know that hole won't cause you a problem if it's a little too big for what you're doing. Another method that's really fun and fast is a pin nailer. All right, so then I'm going to put my top on here and get it just overhanging slightly, because when I bandsawed it, I left about a 1/16 of an inch all the way around. I don't want to undercut it for sure, and I want to make sure nothing is underneath, or I'll have a low spot there. Now, with a 5/8 inch pin in there, I can just hit these, and 3 of it will do it, and that thing is locked on. And they're so tiny, when you pop this off, they're really easy to pull out, and they leave virtually no hole that you could actually see. So let me show you how I just trim this. I've got a 1/2 inch flush cut bearing. The bearing's on the top here. So when I come in, it's going to ride nicely right against this really smooth 24-inch diameter template, and I'll just skim around. And I'm going to turn on the dust collection, and it should capture most everything right up that port. This is the nice thing about doing it on a router table, if you have it, because you don't have to move clamps, and it's very quick and efficient. So if you're doing multiples of tops for some project, you can quickly just circle back and forth until you're all through the project. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to turn on the dust collector. All right, so we can take it back, and to pop it off, sometimes I'll just use a thin putty knife. All you got to do is get it barely in there, and It'll pop right off. So those pins are in there. I could just pull those out really quickly if I want with this. And I'm done. So I just boom, 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 and I'm good to go. All right, so, it's nearly impossible to even see those in there. They're so tiny. But there is a perfectly round 24-inch diameter top. And I'm ready to go with my template on another one without drilling any holes in the center. Thanks so much for being part of it. Hope you have a great night and successful projects.